Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this edition of Defense News Weekly, we'll look at the modernization of the Navy and Marine Corps and if they can afford what they want to do. We're also going to hear more congressional opposition to A-10 retirements and see the Army's new long-range cannon hit its longest range yet. With in-depth interviews, up-close video, and leading analysis, this is Defense News Weekly. Welcome to this week's edition of Defense News Weekly. I'm Jeff Martin. It's been a busy week, both in the defense world and as the coronavirus continues to sweep the globe. Before we dive into this week's news of defense, let's see how the Pentagon is responding to that coronavirus. As the impact of the virus begins to hit the United States, the Pentagon has put travel restrictions in place on service members, DoD civilians, and their families. In addition, many social distancing measures, such as keeping distance between people and moving many meetings to virtual formats, have been put into place. At a briefing this week, the Joint Staff Surgeon laid out what has been done to truly combat the virus within the military.
There are more people ill with the seasonal flu than there are ill with coronavirus worldwide and in the United States and in the military. The reason that we're taking the precautions that you're seeing is this is a new virus, and we are continuing to learn about this virus, about how easy it is to spread the virus, and in particular, in an environment like this in closed spaces, we're trying to figure out the best way to mitigate the risk until we have solid data on that. You know, the military is good on planning. We're also good on trying to decrease risk. So we'd rather mitigate that risk up front than wait and find out that we should have done it because multiple people got sick along the way.
Concerns over the coronavirus have also led to the first cancellation of a domestic U.S. defense trade show, as AUSA's Global Force Symposium, set to happen next week in Huntsville, Alabama, has been called off. In a statement, the organization's president, General Carter Ham, said that the decision was made for the health and safety of attendees. Now, this event is one of the premier land warfare events every year and is likely the first of other similar events to cancel in coming weeks. Be sure to follow our sister publication, Military Times, as this crisis continues for the latest updates. And later this month, a document is expected to be delivered to Capitol Hill, which is going to lay out how the new Space Force is going to incorporate a reserve component. But it's unlikely to establish something like a Space National Guard just yet. Right now, there are about 1,500 National Guard personnel in 9 states and territories that have space missions. But it's unlikely that we would see every state having a presence under whatever the construct becomes. Air Force Secretary Barbara Barrett says she anticipates a clean sheet design for a reserve component, but this comes as both Congressional and Guard leaders are advocating for a Space National Guard across the nation. And Acting Navy Secretary Thomas Modly has commissioned a study on the future of aircraft carriers and carrier-based naval aviation. In a statement, Modly said that the review will be led by the Deputy Secretary of Defense and will include a variety of thinkers and stakeholders on this. This comes as Modly has said the Navy may not build any more Ford-class carriers after the currently planned 4 are commissioned. The group is expected to study both nuclear and conventional power plants, a variety of ship sizes, and a mix of manned and unmanned aircraft for the Air Group. And Lockheed Martin's second flight test of its entry into the Army's Precision Strike Missile Competition has taken place at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, according to a company release. Now, Lockheed Martin is competing with Raytheon, who have not yet flown their Deep Strike missile yet. Lockheed's entry flew 180 kilometers in this test, and the company says it performed as expected. The plan is to field the winner of the competition by 2023, and they would replace aging ATACMS missiles that are aging out of relevance. And the U.S. Army has hit a target 65 kilometers away using its new Extended Range Cannon Artillery, or ERCA cannon, during a test in Yuma, Arizona. That's about as far as it is from Washington, D.C. to Annapolis, Maryland, and it's unclear if they could have gone further. The plan is to field 18 of the cannons in a battalion by 2023, and they're built by BAE Systems. The shell used in the test was a Raytheon-made Precision Excalibur round. And the U.S. Army is now saying they won't be able to fully integrate the Iron Dome system into their command and control architecture, meaning it is unlikely to be further procured. Here's what Futures Command Leader General Mike Murray told Congress about that.
Along that line, does Army have plans to use Iron Dome that the Israelis have developed, but we now co-produce?
Can I go past Tom, sir? Or am I good? So Iron Dome, the 19 NDAA, there was a report submitted that we would purchase 2 batteries of Iron Dome with the intent of integrating them into our integrated air defense system. We do air defense in layers, and so the connections between high altitude, mid altitude, and low altitude systems is very important to us. It took us longer to acquire those 2 batteries than we would have liked for a lot of different reasons, and we are in the process right now. We believe we cannot integrate them into our air defense system based upon some interoperability challenges, some cyber challenges, and some other challenges. So what we ended up having really is 2 standalone batteries that will be very capable, but they cannot be integrated into our air defense system. And so we're working a path right now. The report came in last Friday on our way forward. We anticipate a shoot-off open to U.S. industry, foreign industry, to go after whatever is the best solution to provide that capability.
And speaking of that shoot-off, here are some details that we've been able to put together. It'll take place at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, and will include multiple companies. And whatever system is chosen will use the Sentinel A3 and A4 radars, meaning that the shoot-off will come down to the interceptor that performs best. Possible competitors include Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, as well as possible dark horse candidates that emerge in procurement situations just like this. And both Navy and Marine Corps leaders were on Capitol Hill this week to testify on their modernization efforts. On the Navy side, the services leaders were quizzed both on their fleet structure plans and on how they'll use unmanned systems in the future. Here's what they had to say.
The 2021 budget request for new ships is $4 billion below the 2020 enacted level. We also understand that the Navy is only planning to buy 7 ships in 2021. You currently have, as my understanding, have a fleet of 290 ships. In 2016, the Navy conducted a force structure assessment that shows a requirement of 355 ships. And while Congress has not received an updated assessment, the budget request suggests, perhaps, that the Navy is reducing the number of ships it needs. Is that accurate?
Senator, thanks for the question. It's been a big topic in the various hearings that we've had so far.
It's important to the existence of the Navy, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I will say that we are not coming off our commitment to a larger Navy. We need a larger Navy.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And so we are focused on how we can make that happen. Right now, that force structure assessment from 2016, which pegged it at 355 as the force mix, we're currently looking at that. We've been through the process. Both General Berger and Admiral Gilday conducted something called the Integrated Naval Force Structure Assessment over the last several months. Those conclusions came to me. I forwarded them to the Secretary of Defense. He is reviewing those right now and wants to do a deeper dive. I will say, whatever comes out of that deeper dive, I believe it's going to be more than 355 ships. It'll be somewhere north of that number when we consider some of the new types of platforms that we need. The challenge we have is a flat budget environment.
We have that challenge with you, you know.
Yes, sir, I understand. We are trying to figure out how we can dig within our own budget to free up resources to fund this program. But at the end of the day, it is going to require more top line to get to that number.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Modly, are you still committed to growing the MQ-4C fleet, the Triton?
Yes, we're still committed to that program,
Okay.
sir.
And talk about your use of, and Admiral, certainly you can jump in here as well, but the use of the unmanned as well as your manned ISR
Well,
and its value.
I'll start and then I'll turn it over to the CNO as well. But unmanned is going to be a huge part of our future. It's the types of things that General Berger was talking about. How do we distribute our force more? How do we put ISR assets out there where we don't have people at risk? How do we do it at a lower cost? So unmanned is a critical element, not just unmanned aerial vehicles, but unmanned ships as well. We're looking at all those scenarios for the future.
Senator, in terms of MQ-4, we've just accelerated the deployment of our first 2 out to Guam. And so they're on station and on mission right now in the Western Pacific. The capabilities that the MQ-4 brings to the fleet are game-changing in terms of long-range ISR at altitude with sensors that we haven't had supporting the fleet before. We're also developing the MQ-25, which is an unmanned platform aboard our aircraft carriers that both refuel our wing while it's in the air, as well as providing an ISR sensing capability as well.
How about survivability?
Survivability of both of those airframes?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I think it depends. It's totally dependent upon a threat, and so we certainly wouldn't put those assets in a position where they would be shot down or they would be undefended.
What about survivability? This is one of the things the Air Force has brought up because they're not buying more of the RQ-4. One of the issues being concerns about survivability flying into over countries with advanced air defense systems.
Yes, sir. So the intention in using those systems wouldn't be to put them in a position where they would be subjected to high casualty rates and a heavy anti-air environment. So we would use those ISR assets further back, but based on the sensors that they do have an extended range.
And for the Marine Corps, Commandant General David Berger was asked about how the Marine Corps plans to transform without asking for any more money. And as you can imagine, that wasn't something that congressional leaders are used to hearing.
I sense from your testimony today that, as you say, the Marine Corps is at another inflection point, a pivot. And the language which you've said in your testimony about modernizing the Marine Corps for an era of great power competition will require significant adjustments to long-term service investments, new integrated naval warfighting organizations, and concepts of employment, better training, and education for Marines, changes that only Congress can help us realize. You go on to say something of great significance to an appropriations committee. You say, I seek no additional resources for this effort. Explain this to me. How can you make a significant change in the mission of the Marine Corps, as you've described it here? What is the future of amphibious assault? Has it been redefined or understood today in different terms? And how can you achieve this significant change without additional resources?
There comes a time, I think, military or in the corporate world, in the civilian private sector, where the periodic, are we doing the right things, are we built right for the competition, it's clear that minor adjustments on the edges are not going to do. That's where we are. That's where we are as a service, as an institution. We're built okay for today. We are clearly not built for where we think we will need to be 6, 7, 8, 9 years into the future. That means we need to make some assumptions about where our pacing threat would be in 2030, some assumptions about technology, and some assumptions about the fiscal resources that we would have to work with. So our assumption on the fiscal side, sir, to get at your point, we assume we would have no growth fiscally. Because if we're constrained, self-constrained by that, then we're going to build the best force we can based on the budget we have today. Now, that may be a different picture 10 years from now, but our assumption going in is it's not going to grow. So how do we do that? We need to we need to divest of capabilities that have served us well in Korea and Vietnam and the Persian Gulf, but are not a great fit for what the nation needs us to do in the future.
If I can ask you, and perhaps you can answer this, perhaps you can't, tell me what unique mission the Marine Corps has that cannot be served by another branch of our armed forces in your vision statement.
Against a peer adversary, I think against a smaller adversary, you can take a different approach. But if you believe in great power competition, I do, and it's going to be enduring for a while, then what you don't want to do is, in all cases, match up symmetrically against that adversary. In other words, blunt force against blunt force. So you have to understand where are the areas where we have a unique advantage as a joint force? Where does the naval force have a unique advantage? Where does the Marine Corps fit into that picture? To your point, sir, we have an advantage in that we have been doing expeditionary amphibious operations for 70 years and have a huge head start on the rest of the world. We need to maintain that margin of asymmetrical advantage. It will not be land 2 brigades over a beach against a foe, an adversary that's built up defenses and ready for it.
Classic South Pacific World War II.
Not going to do that. That's correct. So now we need to fight as a distributed maritime force across a much greater area, smaller forces, more capable, more lethal, not land 2 brigades across a beach.
To keep up to date with all of our coverage, be sure to visit our Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn pages. Also, be sure to add us on Apple's News app and other platforms for the latest updates. Now, when we come back, we're going to see congressional opposition to retiring some A-10 aircraft. Congress, and in particular Arizona Democrat Ruben Gallego, are not happy about the Air Force's plans to retire some older A-10s. During a hearing on tactical aircraft, Gallego lit into Air Force leaders. Here's what he had to say.
General Holmes, on February 27th, we received word that the Air Force was changing its retirement plan for 44 A-10 Warthogs. Unfortunately, that change plan didn't reach Chief of Staff of the Air Force in time for him to add this to his testimony on March 4th. Can you comment on what the new plan is now?
Yes, thank you, Congressman. Between General Nahom and I, we'll work the numbers, and I'll kind of talk about the impact, if that's okay. So as we brought our budget forward, we are trying to balance the need to go forward with fifth-gen aircraft, keep a fourth-gen balance, and conduct all the roles that the nation expects us to do all around the world. And as we balance that force and we look at rebuilding it, we wanted to come through and maintain 7 squadrons of A-10s, which is enough for us to have 1 overseas in PACAF that's stationed there, and then have 6 that can be rotationally available. We keep about 1 squadron of A-10s deployed in the CENTCOM area of operations to meet the requirements there. And with those numbers, we can still meet those requirements. We can do the wing upgrades that are required to keep the A-10 useful, and we can bring all of the A-10 fleet up to the same configuration so that they're all just as capable. And General Nahom will talk about the numbers.
Congressman, so for the A-10, as we work ourselves through the F-35 A-10 comparison test, and we know the restrictions on retiring them, and we're watching.
But just to interrupt you there, General, I want to bring that up. So we have the requirements. The report is supposed to come out when?
We're expecting the report in the early fall, sir.
Okay. So if the Air Force has decided to retire A-10s over our own objections here and in respect to law, what's the point of the report? If you guys kind of made decisions before the report came out and came back to us.
Sir, that's our plan. We fully intend to comply with the law about when we can retire the A-10s. But right now we're planning for the next phase for the A-10, right, because when we get past the comparison testing, when we start using F-35 for many of the high-end missions that we're planning on.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it seems prejudicial that you guys already made decisions, already planned the future of the A-10 without showing us the report, so we can have our input, about the comparison between the F-35 and the A-10. Do you see how that would look on our behalf, for how we see things?
Yes, sir. And we're working very closely with DOT&E on the report, not only that, but the IOT&E for the F-35, because it's very important before we go forward with the next phase of the A-10. But what we need from the A-10 moving forward is we still need that airplane in service. We just have to make sure that the A-10s we keep, we upgrade not only with new wings, with a new digital backbone and the avionics to make sure this can be an aircraft that we can use very effectively in low-end conflict for the next 20 years. And we think that's actually a pretty good news story for the A-10, and we intend to make sure we get those numbers right.
And back to you, General Holmes, I guess the bigger question is, we could argue back and forth whether we're doing this report correctly in the right manner, but how did this plan basically evolve to the point where, in my opinion, it seems to be predetermined without any input from Congress? Specifically, if you look at the history of the A-10 in Congress, it has had consistent bipartisan support. So for many of us here, it was quite surprising that some of the Air Force showed up with this plan. That's the first time we'd heard about it. There wasn't any other type of input, especially from the authorizers on this side.
Sir, I'm going to again defer that question to the headquarters Air Force. I think our goal in Air Combat Command, as General Nahom said, was to make sure that all the A-10s we kept for another 20 years were useful and could continue to do what they do on the battlefield well. As far as the decisions at the headquarters Air Force, I'll defer that to General Nahom.
And sir, as we look at the A-10 numbers, as we look at all our fleets, we're very keen on making sure we balance the risk across all our portfolios. We want to make sure we have enough of the modernized fighters, the F-35s, for the high-end fight, as Dr. Roper alluded to in his opening comments. And so we want having that balance.
We haven't, I mean, I understand that, but, most of our fights still right now are not high-end fights. Most of, we find ourselves more doing close air combat support than more than anything else. And thank you for your time, gentlemen. Mr. Chairman, just wanted to note, as I said to General Goldfein last week, for me, the fact that I think the process was just tossed aside from the 2017 NDA, it's just, for me, it's quite galling. And I really hope that this committee will work with me to ensure that we don't allow Congress's voice to be not heard again.
When we come back, we're going to hear from the commander of U.S. Southern Command about more forces coming to his area of responsibility. On this week's Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack offers her latest tips.
From building your small business fleet and improving cash flow to renovating office space and purchasing IT equipment, as business owners come to find out quickly, you need access to capital to grow your company. So it's good that you actually do have options. If you're in the right space and time in your business, a business loan is a great place to start. It works like any other loan. You receive a lump sum of funding up front and pay it back in monthly installments over your designated period of time. Most banks or credit unions offer business loans, and the best place to start is the one where you've been doing your personal banking for years, the one you trust and the one that knows you. Before you apply, either dig up or create your business plan. You'll need that for any lender to consider lending to you for your business. You'll also need to provide a form of collateral or income to back up your reason for getting the loan. Another way to get access to capital is to get a business credit card. It's very similar to your personal credit card. You're given borrowing access to funds up to a certain limit for your business expenses. A lot of business owners make the most of a combo approach of business card and business loan, using the credit card for smaller day-to-day costs and the business loan to fund larger projects. Deciding what's best for your business depends on the type of business you own. And when it comes to growing your business, it should be a partnership between you and your lender.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more defense news coverage, be sure to visit our website at defensenews.com and subscribe to our Early Bird Brief, delivered to your inbox every weekday morning to get you ready to start the day. And when we come back, we're going to hear from the commander of United States Southern Command about more forces that are coming to his area of responsibility. One of Defense Secretary Mark Esper's biggest priorities has been to examine each combatant command to see if they need more or less resources. This week, the commander of U.S. SOUTHCOM visited the Pentagon and talked about the forces that are coming to his area.
I think the onus is on all of us to work together to see where these assets best meet the needs of the nation, first and foremost on how does it enhance security here at home, and then how does it enhance partner security. The two work together. And as we go forward, it'll be part of the conversation on combatant command review for sure. And during the process, we had a very robust discussion about the need to demonstrate adequate return on investment for the increases in forces that we would be seeing.
Can you give us some details on what specifically we're talking about for increases?
Sure. The operation area that we look at when I'll just pick the counter-narcotics mission set. There are others, but that one particular area size the U.S. So if going back and looking at my congressional testimony last year, other combatant commanders, we've been working against that problem set with force packages, and think of a force package as a maritime patrol aircraft, a ship, a helicopter. It could be a Coast Guard cutter, a Navy ship, a law enforcement jet. The area the size of the United States, we've been working between 6 and 8 ships. So we've been consistently saying that number we really need to cover that zone is much larger. And so was part of the rationale for the additional force packages that we'll be receiving. So you'll see additional forces in the air, on the land, sea, and some maneuver forces ashore, some security force assistance brigades to work with our partners. So it'll be an all-domain approach. I would not like to go into detailed numbers. We'd keep it predictable for our allies and partners and unpredictable for our enemies.
Now that's all I've got time for this week, but if you want to see and read more, be sure to visit our website at defensenews.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.